In downtown Toronto at the Burton Healthcare Conference, I'm joined by Eden Rahim, the portfolio manager at Next Edge Capital for Biotech Fund. So Eden, talk to us about what's happening in Canada for small caps in biotech.
It's actually a really interesting market over the past year. So biotech in Canada has been under siege for many years. But then about a year ago, the whole sector really bottomed. Now, the headlines and the travails of large companies like Valiant and Concordia have really hogged the headlines.
Right.
So the investors' interpretation of what the sector is going through is actually quite misleading. In contrast, you've had a lot of really terrific small companies that have performed exceptionally well, up hundreds of percent. They are developing drugs, developing devices that are advancing, that are commercializing, that are changing the landscape, and they're performing exceptionally well, but they're under the radar.
Right. Now you lead the only biotech mutual fund in Canada. What is that like? What sorts of things about companies do you focus on?
So typically, this fund is invested about 60% in U.S. companies, late-stage companies, late phase 3, phase 2 companies, and about 25% in Canada. And that's really a function of the fact that our market's so much smaller than the U.S. market is. So I typically focus on companies that are developing breakthrough therapeutics that are in late stage, that have good clinical data, and are maybe a year or 2 or 3 from commercialization. In Canada, we don't have a wide variety of companies like that, but we have a good group of small companies that are developing devices or in earlier stages of drug development that are severely underpriced, or other companies that are rescuing its model. So it may have been stressed, but it's able to raise funding at distressed prices, and it can execute on its business plan.
Right.
That's the third thing that's happened here.
Interesting. So Eden, can you define what biotechnology means, and also how long it'll take Canada to catch up to maybe the leaders globally?
Okay, there are two things. So biotechnology basically involves developing a therapeutic that can trigger the DNA in your cells to create a protein. And what that protein does is that it causes a reaction in your body to something. So the protein may inhibit a certain reaction, or it may express a certain reaction. So for instance, you take something like an arthritis drug like Enbrel, right? You take a drug, it's called an anti-TNF alpha. It creates a protein that blocks an immune response in your body, and it relieves the arthritis. So that's an example of a biologic drug. In terms of Canada, in the landscape, unfortunately, for a country as great as we are lagging behind primarily because of healthcare funding. So investors have gravitated towards investments in resources. It's a favorite of them, and it's lagged in investments in healthcare. And we have such an intelligence base from universities and from companies but it's really undercapitalized. Right. So I think it's really early days to invest in healthcare in Canada.
Right. So for those investors who are in it, or for those who are wanting to get in it, what should we expect?
I think you have to be very careful. It's not so much a do-it-yourself industry. You have to take a diversified approach, because some of these companies have binary risk. They have ongoing financing needs, and you have to be able to analyze clinical data. You have to analyze trial outcomes.
Right.
You have to analyze competitive landscape. Is their therapeutic really better than anything that's out there? So this is one of the more complex industries that it definitely pays to have a more diversified approach. And don't buy into promotional companies. Just do the analysis and read the scientific papers and so on.
Right, nice tips. And is there any way we can learn more from you for the benefit of the audience?
We have our website at Next Edge Capital. I put a lot of material on there. I write blog pieces, I tweet, and so on. So I try to take an educational approach. So I'll write pieces on the genomic revolution and so on, something that would give investors insight into what's unfolding and some of the opportunities are there. And sometimes, I make media appearances and so on where I talk about specific names.
Like here.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Eden.
Thank you very much for having me.
For more from the Burton Conference, you can go to our website, SmallCapPower.com.